All right, the time is now 7:19. I call to order this meeting of the Columbus Common Council Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, November 21st, 2017. At this point, we could take a roll call, please, Pat.
Hendrickson?
Here.
Kenny?
Here.
Malat?
Here.
Reed? Here. Rule?
Here.
Tome?
Here.
All right, this meeting has been noticed appropriately according to state statutes. The agenda is before you, so I'd look for a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, seeing none, the agenda is approved. Item 4 now is citizen comments on agenda items. I believe nobody has signed up this evening. So we will jump right into item number 5, which is the request by Lifestar EMS to utilize TRIP or Tax Refund Intercept Program. And I believe we have a representative of Lifestar.
Does this automatically come on? Yeah. Okay. Good evening. My name is Mike Krieger. I'm the owner of Lifestar Ambulance. If you didn't know, we're your ambulance provider here in the city of Columbus and the townships that surround that. I want to talk to you a little bit tonight about the Tax Refund Intercept Program. The TRIP program is something that's been available to ambulance services that were municipally owned for a long, long time. And back in 2015, that was expanded to include any ambulance service that provides 911 response to municipality. So what we would like to do is get an agreement with the city so that we can utilize that TRIP program for patients that utilize the ambulance and don't reimburse us for the expense of responding to their medical emergency. What this would involve for the city is basically to sign the agreement, and from there we have contracted with a third party, the Stark Collection Agency in Madison, to administer that TRIP program for us. Once that agreement is signed by the city, there should be very little involvement by the city. The only thing that the Stark Agency said occasionally happens is the city's name is technically on this debt because you're certifying the debt, and sometimes you would have somebody that would call up and say, I'm disputing this debt, or they might send you a letter that says that they are disputing that debt. And from there, it just needs to be forwarded on to the Stark Collection Agency. That agency will handle the notifications to the individuals that they were entered into the TRIP program for payment. They would take care of all of the reconciliation between the balances owed and TRIP payments and basically everything with that. Another question that sometimes comes up is the pecking order of who gets their money. And you as a city get your money before Lifestar would. When the TRIP program was expanded, that hierarchy was changed so that the state gets their money first, right behind child support. After that, state agencies, after the DOR, then it goes down to the municipalities, and then all of their debts are pretty much at the end. I think tribal debt is something that's a little behind us, but if somebody owed you property taxes or court costs or something like that, that would go to you first before us. There is a slight exception. If we list a debt in 2018 and you're trying to collect 2020 or 21 taxes, like our debt would come before that at that point, but there's a several year spread before we would take some priority over you. So I'd open it up to any questions that you may have about the TRIP program.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Krieger. It's well presented. I think it's pretty self-explanatory in the name itself, Tax Refund Intercept Program. So anybody looking to take a tax refund from the state of Wisconsin, this would be your chance to get in line and recoup some of your costs before that refund made its way to them personally. I believe we had a question from the city administrator in the agenda, in the memo, which was just kind of clearing up maybe with Attorney Johnson that we would definitely be the authority to grant this permission, or however you'd like to word it.
Right. I think that the way that this agreement is in your packet is exactly how it should be, is that the city should be the signing on agency, just to keep it nice and clean. If Mr. Krieger has his process down and the Stark company is going to take care of everything as far as the actual process goes, then that will make the job for the city very easy. So,
Any other questions or concerns from Members of council? Mayor Tone?
Have we utilized this through the city in recent years? Or is it something different?
There's something that we utilize, I don't know if it's exactly TRIP, but it's something I know that Kim utilizes for collecting.
Okay,
Municipal court uses this as well.
okay.
There's a WCS, I think it is called. It's Wisconsin Collection System, and it's basically like a state collection agency on behalf of the municipalities.
That's the one we do.
And that precedes this debt as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. At this point, we'll take this forward to the next COW and take our votes on it at that time.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening. All right. Next on the agenda is the further discussion on snowmobile ordinance. And we do have Jake Boness here from the local snowmobile club. And in our packets, we have some very nice detailed maps per our request. So we would be looking to keep this discussion going and feedback on the maps and the like. So at this point, I will open the floor up to any questions or concerns or. Thank you very much for the maps, by the way, Jake. That was very detailed. There's one map included in here. I just want to clarify. I think the Rotary Park one, I think we've talked about this before. Is that technically outside the city limit?
It's in the city,
Okay.
but not in the county.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, I liked its inclusion regardless of whether we have that authority or not, because it just still kind of,
Or actually, it's
Sets the
it's
perimeter.
close, but, yep.
yeah, I figured it's, yeah. And so in addition to the maps, we do have the ongoing draft ordinance with language pertaining to the maps establishing the trail, time of operation, speed limit, and the like. Rod?
On Maple Avenue, we have the new light poles up there, right? There are no more, okay. I'll just make sure we have the trail, put the light poles up on the trail.
Leave this open for a few more minutes as folks kind of peruse this packet a little further, but we've discussed this issue at some length, so at this point, I think we're getting hopefully near the end. So at this point, we would be looking to get some sort of consensus on the draft language presented, which would include the designation of the trail, which is illustrated with the maps that were included in our packets as well. Mayor Tone?
If we're talking about trail designation, I guess in the draft ordinance, the one thing I'm looking at, and I'm glad we got a lot of maps here because there's a lot of detail. The first map, I guess, which is the non-satellite map, has all of the yellow trails which are represented on the following pages. But I think a bulk of this conversation has been about the spurs for gas, food, and lodging versus the right of access issue. There's two separate things in there. I think the trail that's marked coming into Rotary Park is obviously something that's utilized if there's a public access portion or public right of access provision in the ordinance. Otherwise, that doesn't really count for gas, food, and lodging, I guess. It's irrelevant for me in the maps. And then there's also another spur on the front map, which is yellow, that breaks off from Maple Avenue and heads south, going over towards County K. I believe that was part of the trail last year that was broken, that went over by the water tower. And I'm a little concerned about having that there as a spur because it wouldn't be going to gas, food, and lodging. It should essentially be a one-way trail only for right of access outward residential access. I think you can see that more clearly on the second color page. This one. I guess we could consider it a spur, but it would be more for a spur for right of access versus, but I think it would have to be signed differently to keep people coming in for gas, food, and lodging. to
Yeah,
have
that
off
one
way.
would have a specific designated sign that says residential use only, or access only. And the one at Rotary Park has been there as long as I can remember it, because it is a kind of a parking spot as well for people dropping off of trailers and things like that. I've used it for that purpose when I was younger.
Sure. And I guess since it's technically not in the city, it doesn't, we don't really need to, it should be known.
Right.
Obviously, that that's a place to go, put your sled in.
Given the fact that you have that sign designating that as residential access only at that point, I'd be fine with that spur as well, because it kind of gets that section of town to the gas, food, and lodging.
That's also, yeah, the one goes across the bridge to the left and that one goes to the right, so it is more of a separate dividing point as well, so it's not used for the same point to get to gas, I guess. You actually have to deviate from the main trail to get to it.
Okay. Mike?
Maybe to further define my point, I guess, is that that trail could serve residential access for someone with abutting property unless we have a right of access provision in the ordinance, which I'm not in favor of this year. Because that trail ends and begins a trail system of about 50 miles of city streets that are connected to it. That's the question. And so I'm trying to get the focus on the gas, food, and lodging spur issue to move forward.
So you're saying that that trail spur shouldn't exist if we don't have residential access this year?
I don't think it's going to serve any purpose other than possibly this property or this property that abuts that field. But you know what I'm getting at? It's part of an old trail that went through the city last year. It doesn't exist any longer. I could see that possibly turning into an issue if someone disregards the sign and you've got the spur that runs out to where it did the last 3 years and people started going where they remembered the trail to be, I guess. I see it as a potential problem.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely fine with all the rest of the trails that are marked down here because they all go directly, from the city limits into gas, food, and lodge.
Yeah, I for one am also not in favor of residential access, but I think that's something we need to come to terms on here as a body, a consensus. Matt?
Yeah, Mike, just to springboard off of what you said, this has been kind of my soapbox for a while. I am happy with everything as presented here and the work that's kind of been done between the Snow Blazers and the city. My hang-up still falls under that 98-187 sub B1. Snowmobiles may be operated on public streets for the purpose of residential access. Purpose of residential street access means for the purpose of traveling the shortest distance between the snowmobile operator's residence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Running the sleds down the street, I still think falls into a maintenance issue for us and a safety issue. I think something that could be readdressed going forward. I think after the events of the past year or 2 or 3, I think easing kind of back into this and doing spurs for gas, food, and lodging makes sense. But the spur that comes off of Maple down to County K is basically there because of that 187B1 section that I don't think we should have in there for several different reasons. But at the end of the day, gas, food, and lodging, I think that we need to keep working together through this. And I just like to see more of an incremental step into this. But this, I feel like we're kind of jumping hands, head, feet, and whole body back into something that had a little bit of issues last year or the year before. So
Trina?
Oh, I'm feeling comfortable with the trail as presented. For the little extra spur, did you say that there's parking somewhere along that
No,
area?
that's out
Rotary.
here.
Oh, that's on the other side.
Rotary
Okay.
So
Park
people
there is.
would park trailers, load up, and hit the
Okay.
trail that way.
I'm still not bothered by the spur on the other side.
Regan?
I guess, Jake, is there anything that you foresee that we're not raising about if that spur weren't to exist as part of this trail?
Basically, that was just there for residential access. That trail actually, prior to even the city trail itself, used to go to the Amico station, or the BP station. And that is kind of where we took off with it to continue the rest of the way to connect through town. And that's why we didn't bring it, well, we really can't bring it to that one anymore because it might bring back, if there isn't a city trail, people would remember, this is where I want to go, so I'm going to go. So that's why we just left it at K, dead ended it. We were gonna sign it, especially residential access only, and then that was just for residents to use only to get to the main trail system on that side of town. We do have a couple families over in Highland Ridge that do utilize that trail system as well.
So if I live in town and I want to take advantage of getting to the county parks, we're back to the situation where they have to put it on a trailer, drive the sled somewhere to access the county
Correct.
trails.
That's what, 5 years ago, I used to have to trailer either to the Columbus West or Rotary Park.
Is it your sense that folks in the club that most of them have trailers, or do most of them not have trailers?
We've heard both 50-50. I mean, there is people in town, we know of a couple people that don't have trailers, and they were utilizing the system. They were kind of excited. That's why they got a sled and joined the club, and it was a new sport for them.
Everyone kind of already knows I am in favor of the residential access. I think to Jake's last point, I know the city trail has been an issue. I don't see them necessarily connected with the issue of residential access to the county trails. That was happening before we had the trail through the city last year. And I know there's been ups and downs with this whole discussion, but I didn't hear that was a particularly contentious issue in the past. So I would be in favor of keeping the residential access.
And I think part of my issue with residential access is identification of who's a resident and who's not. I think that's been raised a few times. Obviously, the concerns about infrastructure and the negative effects on it, I've said enough times to talk myself blue in the face. So I'm still against it, but obviously I just urging us to kind of come to consensus. Otherwise, we'll just move this forward and take a vote on it soon. Mike?
I can be in favor of residential access in the future, as we've discussed, maybe having a trail pass. Then you know how many people really truly need to have that direct access to get to the trails. You know where they're coming from, you know where they're going. It's a way to educate them on the shortest route possible, because there is no enforcement of this. And to your point, I guess, about whether or not the right of access was an issue, I think that came to the forefront of my concern last year, because technically when everything went crazy, the trail was closed. So it was a residential right of access that was being utilized at that time to a certain degree. I think people were kind of pointing fingers as to whether or not this was someone that came in from out of town, or if it was a club member, and we assume that it's not a club member because they value that access and that trail. So that's why I'm hoping we can just kind of take a step back and approve what works, which is the gas, food, and lodging spurs this year, and then maybe move forward working on the right of access issue next year with a trail pass or something like that, just rather than just opening up every mile lane road that we have in the city to get to this point or the other point. I think is not a direction that I want to go in after last year. I just kind of want to ease it back and try to work together and incrementally bring it all back into focus. So.
Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I think that we can definitely work our way towards another step or another layer on this. I think that it would behoove us now, as we're kind of getting close to the snow fly, and just gas, food, and lodging for right now, and then see where we are from there, not precluding, 'cause I think that there's other conversations we can have too, where obviously my big concern is damage to roads and safety concerns, as you all know what hat I wear besides this. Maybe a conversation needs to happen thinking outside the box of, what if we talk to Rotarians about putting up a fenced-in area and then people can store sleds in Rotary Park? I mean, like, there's outside-the-box ideas that we could probably discuss that might kind of come to a happy median that everybody can be happy with from all aspects. But I think we need time to get down that line before we just pick the entire ordinance as is and shoot it straight through. Because I think if we do that now, we're going to have a hard time walking this back. Once you give up the cat, it's hard to get it back. I don't know, something like that. Help me out with thing rod, bushes and birds and whatnot.
At this point, I guess I'd like to see where everybody stands on residential access. I know Regan would be a yes for residential access. I'm a no. Matt's a no. Trina and Rod, would you care to weigh in on this so we can kind of see how we should proceed?
Well, if we're going to talk about this next year, I'll go with you guys that we can work on the residential access next year and see where that goes. I'm not sure how we open that conversation on how we find out who's going to access that, but gas, food, and lodging is fine.
Trina?
I'd like to be able to offer residential access, but at this point, with snow coming soon, I really don't see how we can get everything figured out in time. So I would be okay with following the lead.
So at this point, I think we'd have consensus to bring this ordinance forward without residential access, but accepting the trail spurs as presented, minus the spur that would carry to County Road K. Would that seem to comport with your ideas here, Mike?
I think, as Jake kind of said, it gets rid of that familiarity, if there's not going to be public access. Otherwise, I don't see it doing anything but creating that scenario. I remember this place, and now I'm going to try to go to Amico if there's no through trail there. But obviously, you've staked that in the past, so if we can work next year on the public access and you still have that there's a spur coming in.
Yeah, well, we'll always be able to mark that one.
Sure.
Where-
Is that the same landowner that you have with the rest of the spur that comes in?
Yeah.
So it's all one owner?
Yeah.
Where would you go ahead and terminate that spur, or would you even have it come off of Maple at this point?
I wouldn't even, we wouldn't even probably put that one in then.
Okay,
Because there would be no viable reason to have it go across that field.
okay. So maybe we should redact that from the next version of the map that comes forward to the regular meeting.
Was there a curfew for the access for fuel? And
There's an hours of operation written in as no operation between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. flat, right?
Unless
Whoa.
operations on designated route is set
Right,
forth.
the trail
Oh,
is 20,
yeah, I crossed that
the
part
trail
out.
itself is 24/7. And that was the other question that I had, if you look at this, because the direction that you're planning to go now, basically, there's no snowmobiling in the city between the hours of 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. except on the trail. So the trail is open at all hours, and what this will prevent is somebody tooling around in their backyard. Literally.
Between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m.
Right, literally. So if you're comfortable with the trail itself being open basically 24 hours a day, then this language is fine. Otherwise, it needs to be modified a little bit.
Given where that trail lies at this point, I'm not sure I have a problem with that. Mike?
I don't either, because it didn't have a time restriction on it before either. So
And it's
if
on
it-
the perimeter.
Correct, it's in a commercial district, it's not in a heavy residential area.
Yep. So at this point, we'll move this forward, and you guys have the changes we'd like to see so that we can take a vote on this? Yeah? All right. Thank you very much, Jake. And we will see you again soon, and I do appreciate all your efforts on this.
Not a problem.
Thank you very much.
thanks.
All All right, next we have item 7, the SMMA with DOT for 1660 Interchange Project 2018, FYI, BTW, I don't know. Anyway. We have the state municipal agreement and a state municipal maintenance agreement to consider. So at this point, Patrick, the floor is yours.
Okay, yeah. Some of you probably are really familiar with the SMAs that we did with James Street. This is one setting up for that project we're talking about for next year. Council has discussed issues and desires with the use of the CSS funds, which is the black streetlight poles extending further west. The issue contained in the proposed SMA then just shows that the engineer's estimate goes over our allotted amount for CSS. So when I checked in on that issue with DOT, it just was, this is the estimate, so just so you're aware, if it comes in at that estimated potential over, potential costs over and above your allotted grant will be the responsibility of the municipality. So if it comes under the 47,000, there would be no additional cost. But I understand that the project has been bid and there's a low bidder. They're going through that process. I asked a representative at DOT if they can provide more of a concrete estimate for the black poles, and she said she would need to look into that, and I would probably be getting that after the Thanksgiving holiday. So that's one piece. Then the additional piece was the SMMA, which is related to maintenance, and the summary there is that the state is not particularly interested in maintaining that new stretch, but in exchange we would receive the additional factor in our miles that we submit to the state for our state shared transportation aids that would cover our maintenance costs. So this is something new, but it just I think it just documents what would have happened anyway, the understanding. So these are two items that the state's looking for our agreement on. Projects coming next year, so they're wondering about it. But again, like I said, I did not receive these things until it was Tuesday of last week.
So first issue first, maybe identify a funding source if we go over the 47,000.
Right.
Or if we still care to go that direction, which I think we do.
Yep, and I mentioned a couple of thoughts in the memo as terms of funding, if need be, could be included in the borrowing, potentially the state trust fund loan. I think we're going to do with Hall Road was one possibility. Dipping into maybe some of the additional undesignated funds, if even it goes to the 7,000, that's really not significant, as we talked about in our budget. So that could be, and then I guess the third option would be to find cuts.
Would it be eligible for the state trust fund loan?
Yeah.
It would be?
Yeah.
Wrapped all in with Hall Road?
Right.
Okay.
By the time, I guess presuming if we're going to move this forward, by the time we'll meet again, I'll have that number available for you.
Okay.
So we'll know what we're talking about.
Mayor Tome?
Was that total cost then for the CSS just for the lighted or the black poles then?
Yes.
There wasn't anything else that we had selected, it's just for the,
Right, yeah. Look back on the minutes and some of the materials, and that was what was approved.
And then the municipal maintenance agreement, that would be basically, how far would that extend us to the west? Like on the other side of 151?
It would be up to the jurisdictional boundaries.
Okay, so past last year's project?
Right, and I think I want to say Davis DPW, they address a lot of the area out at 1660 interchange. But this section, the county comes in and does things for the state, so I think they take care of that now, and now we would have to plow that area.
And like you said, then that would be considered as part of our total
Correct.
road surface and state share and all that good stuff.
Yes.
Mike?
Which fund does that go to? Is that a connecting road then? Don't we get two different funding sources for the roads? Like the shared revenue, and then we get the connecting
Yeah.
limits roads?
Yeah, they both are shown separately under revenues for intergovernmental, but Kim splits them out, so we know what we get for each.
So this is about a half a mile. I mean, what does that
Yeah.
turn into financially, annually?
I wouldn't think a whole lot, but I don't even know how they calculate it. We have to submit it every year to the state, and then through the formula, they give us an allotment, so.
Is the SMMA something new that the DOT is doing to save money now? Because this didn't come up during the signalization project
Right.
last year, so.
Yeah, when it was presented to me, it was said, I was told this is a new procedure that they're doing with these projects.
And we don't have any choice in whether or not we want to participate in that.
My sense is no.
We get some free highway.
We do that.
You can say no, but then no road.
Yeah, exactly.
Not sure if you've got the direction you need from us on this point. Do we need to flesh out the SMA thing at this point? I mean, as far as the lighted poles and,
If there's a comfort level in moving forward, and what I think we could do is, like I said, I'll get a more concrete number and know if there's any overage over that CSS. And if that's the case, we could come back when we're dealing with the budget and offer a couple of different options on how to address that.
okay. Mayor Tone?
Was there any design work done on the lighting for the costs to this point?
That's my understanding of the total cost, so design and materials.
Okay. It's been a couple of years, I guess, since we had the discussion about adding lights out there, so I don't know that it was very clear to me at that time of how many lights we're adding. So I suppose the design part comes into that a little bit, and I
Yeah.
don't know if there's any potential at this point for cost savings or adjustments there, but ultimately $7,000 is minimal, I guess, because what we're trying to do is just continue the illumination
Yeah.
to that part of the city, so I'm not too concerned about the $7,000, but just didn't know how tight that design was for the project yet, so.
Yeah, yeah, clearly the design is done and the project's bid, but, and I'm not sure at this point if we would have a whole lot of say in the number of poles. I think they set it by probably some standard specs, but, that's something I can certainly get us a clear picture on.
Rod?
Do we buy the poles and then rent them to Water and Light, or do they buy the poles and we rent them from Water and Light? There's some weirdness.
There is some uniqueness to that. Pole, I believe Water and Light is the controller of the poles. We actually have more into the signals, the signal lights. The Water and Light doesn't have anything to
Okay,
do with
yeah.
that, but
Okay.
the street lights are Water and Light.
Again, so timeline, SMA, decision, should we bring this back to the committee of the whole on December 5th? Get some of that other information, and then hopefully we could get a consensus that evening to either move it forward, and obviously the SMMA is gonna happen. But
Yeah.
would that work with this timeline, Patrick?
I definitely believe it would.
Okay. Then we will see this again at the next meeting on December 5th. Thank you very much. Item 8, review of Highway 89 issues, further discussion on CSS rural urban sections.
Yeah, we've talked at the last couple of committee of the whole meetings about particular, well, first I mentioned in the memo that I wanted to just recap the public information meeting that was held last week. DOT put on the project. This is a project that's not to happen till 2022, but it drew a fairly good number of folks to the meeting, just with questions, asking questions about the dimensions of the road and the placement of bike lanes, how the crossings near the school will be marked. So I think it was a good discussion, and I think that was the, if some remember with James Street, one of those first PIM meetings was where people are allowed to write down comments, provide them to DOT, so that may still factor in how the design and process goes with the project. So it was some good discussion. Related to that, we get back to then another focus on CSS, and we've talked about colored crosswalks, but that resulted in just some concerns because of the asphalt instead of concrete. So when we were talking again, I wanted to just further maybe center around some concepts and ideas for what we'd like to see with that project. And what I took away from the last meeting was some interest in some enhanced infrastructure related to crossings at the pool, crossings at the high school, and potentially St. Jerome's, I would think. And I provided some pictures. One thought that came to light in staff discussions was maybe looking at a speed counter, or one of the things where, just like we're getting the speed board to be more mobile, potentially we could utilize CSS funds to strategically place that. I mean, that could be used as a way to calm the traffic around some areas where there are a lot of children, pedestrians, bikers. So that was an idea that I was just throwing out for you. In terms of signage and crosswalks, I think a lot of the standard design will go into the project, so whether we go above and beyond that, that could be something that's considered, but I just wanted to see if the council had any further thoughts on that. And then Mayor Tom, I know you mentioned wayfinding signs, potential other kind of signage. I included a couple of examples on your desks tonight, so thought that could be also a direction we wanted to further explore. So, and then, it seems like the DOT wants answers quickly, but this project is 5 years away, so.
There's still time for them to take it away from us.
Or push it out a few years, so.
Or kick us down the road, not take it away.
Yeah.
Trina?
Oh, I just wanted to inquire about a possible natural planting area on top of having bike lanes and some new signage, just to see some prices and location options. I know that was listed on the possibilities for what might be covered.
And is there that triangle lot right at Farnham and Waterloo, I think is where you brought that idea up initially. Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing stuff on that as well. Matt?
Looking at kind of what you provided in here, Patrick, some of the different, slow down and flashing. I guess with the school and the pool and kind of a higher volume of foot traffic possibly in that area, I guess conversations about doing some sort of RRFB should be activated to try to I think those have a lot more success, it seems like, than a school flashing light, and people still kind of blow through. Our school zone's going pretty fast, but I know a lot of people really react very well to the RFBs and the so I guess it's been to be seen if that's kind of falls into the same line as that. I know those are probably a little bit pricier than your flashing slow signs, but.
What's an RFB, Matt?
Oh, God. Rapid rectangular flashing beacon. Mid-block crossing of Beaver Dam in our downtown. They have one that got put in a couple years ago. Options are push button to activate it, and it kicks on and has the rapid flashing that in basically is the most obnoxious way to let people know if somebody's actively crossing the road. One I've seen recently that I actually thought was really cool, AmFam campus has them, but they have like sensors that when you walk past it, it automatically kicks it on. Whether it's a push button or an auto sensor, I think they're both a good idea. I do think if we have kids with the school and the pool and stuff, maybe an activated one might be a little bit better idea, because I have seen in several occasions kids actually are afraid to push the button to activate it, and they'll stand there at the crosswalk and they actually push the button, and cars will just go back, back and forth. So, yeah, rapid rectangular flashing beacon, one of the many alphabet soup acronyms from us folks. So, but I do like the idea of doing something safety orientated like this, some sort of welcome sign that's a little bit more enjoyable. But there's obviously not a lot there. But
Yeah, I really like that RFB idea. That's as far as safety features in that section. I think that might be a little more, I hate to say that, but yeah, maybe a little more valuable than the speed limit sign for the reasons you said. Mike?
Is that a standalone piece that you have there with the pictures? I don't have one of those for some reason.
Oh, I'm
was
sorry.
it in our packet or?
No.
I had them laid out.
Oh,
I got,
you
I
got
got
doubles.
two of these.
Here.
Oh,
I'll just take Andy's. Thank you, though.
take that in.
Yeah, it might be a little more fitting to have that attention call to the crosswalk rather than just the speed, because we also have our dutiful patrolmen out there regularly this school year for sure, I've noticed. So that's thanks for bringing that idea forward. Maybe we can get some of those
yeah.
images and ideas presented at the next one too, along with some, was it prairie restoration? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mayor Tome?
Yeah, I like all these ideas. I think we need to explore costs as well.
Yeah.
And I like the examples of the signs. I think if we're going to have more of a entrance to the city with some prairie grass, it would be nice to introduce some signage that's a bit more decorative. Ours should probably say Columbus instead of combined locks on it. Just a suggestion.
Yeah.
But then coming into town, I think if we can incorporate that same look to direct people to like the Aquatic Center, Fireman's Park, things like that. Right now we just have those traditional like green or brown signs, and it would be nice to have something that's a little bit more decorative to draw people into those areas. So.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Good. I think I got enough to go keep digging and fleshing out some costs, and we'll bring it back.
Great. So we will see this again December 5th. Thank you very much. And number 9 is fuel purchasing bidding / contract for 2018.
So this is something we've been doing for the last several years, trying to utilize our local businesses for most optimal costs for fuel purchase. And it's time to set the bid out again. And for those who haven't been on the council for as long, I thought it would be beneficial for you to see what we do, see the RFP, and we have distributed those out to the local businesses, the gas stations in town, and have set a bid opening date of, I believe, the Monday before our next council meeting. So if there aren't any concerns, we'd likely have a low bidder of an agreement set for then the next council meeting. So that would give us time to set things up with the vendor. As we learned in the past with the others, that it takes a little time for cards and systems to be set up before the new year. So, but it's proven to save us considerable amount of money on the fuel.
Yeah. So this is basically informational. You're letting us know that the RFP's gone out and due diligence and all that good stuff for making sure we get a good contract value for providing diesel fuel and gasoline to the city's fleet. So guess we'll look for more information on Tuesday the 5th and see if we get some of these bids returned.
Great.
All right. Other than that, I would be looking nice and early to take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We will return Tuesday, December 5th at 6:30 PM. Thank you for watching and have a happy Thanksgiving. Good night.